you should always beware that your closest friend could be your worst enemy. A woman named Naomi was walking home alone from work. She was right across her house when she noticed somebody was following her. It was late at night, so she couldn't see what this person looked like, but she noticed that they had their face covered. All of a sudden, she felt a splash of some sort of liquid on her face. Immediately, she starts screaming and ran towards her house and starts banging on the door for her uncle to open since they lived together at the time. As she's banging on the door, she's screaming that her face is burning. Somebody had thrown acid on her face, which permanently disfigured her. I posted the pictures on my Instagram story since it might be too graphic for TikTok. Her uncle called the police and an ambulance came to take her to the hospital. They asked Naomi if she knew anybody that would want to do something like this to her. Surprising enough, she said her friend Mary of 10 years had said she wanted to throw acid on her one time when they fell out. When they questioned Mary, she claimed she didn't remember saying that to Naomi. While Naomi was in the hospital, Mary was texting her acting concerned, so it can possibly be her. Until police noticed something on CCTV footage. The person with her face covered who attacked Naomi was holding a purse that looked exactly like the purse that Naomi's friend always carried around. Part 2 of why you should always beware that your closest friend could be your worst enemy. After noticing on CCTV footage that Naomi's attacker who threw acid on her face was holding a handbag that looked exactly like her friend Mary's, they took Mary back into custody and got a warrant to search her home. In the home, they found the bag, and the bag had damages that were similar to damages made with acid on that kind of material. They found out that Mary did this to her friend because Naomi called her ugly one time, and Mary took that personally. Mary knew that Naomi had dreams of joining the beauty industry. She was and still is a beautiful girl. That one time they fell out, Mary became friends with Naomi again just to get close to her, just to throw acid on her face because she was jealous of her. She premeditated this attack on her friend. Mary never wanted to admit that she did it. She claimed Naomi threw the acid on her own face. Obviously, the judge did not believe that and sentenced Mary 12 years in prison. Ever since the attack, Naomi felt as if she could never be seen as normal again. She says whenever she goes out in public, people react to her face, which reminds her of what she looks like. It took her a while to gain back her self-esteem, but now she has amazing friends who always remind her of how beautiful she is.
I, 29 female, was pregnant with twins a few years ago. Unfortunately, only one baby survived, a little boy who we called Henry, and my daughter who passed, we called her Daphne. My sister and I were close growing up, but we drifted apart. There was a rivalry on her part after I met my partner. For example, she hated that we got engaged before her. She has been with her partner for 3+ more years, and she threw a fit saying she wouldn't attend our wedding unless she was engaged too. So they got engaged, and threw an engagement party the night before my wedding. When I announced my pregnancy, she wasn't happy, as I'd done another thing before her, but when my daughter died, she seemed to be a lot nicer. Because of this change, we made her Henry's godparent. She became pregnant recently and refused to announce the name until a few days after birth. The baby girl was called Theodora, which is beautiful. I was bringing presents to her, and I saw my dad building a huge toy box with the name Daphne on it. When I questioned this, I was told the baby is going to be called Daphne and only Theodora on paper. No one will use her full name, only her nickname. All of my family knew and supported her. I got upset and started shouting, asking if this was a cruel prank. She came out and told me to F off. I don't own a name and she liked it since my baby's funeral. My family are on her side and say, why do I care? My baby is not here, so there is no confusion and don't see why I caused a scene and ruined her happy time, and why can't I be happy for her? They're saying I'm being petty and cruel. They want me to apologize, but I don't want to.
Story time of the trio that killed their victims and fed them to their neighbors. 2 women and 1 man who were in a love triangle would lure young women to their house by offering them work as a nanny. A lot of these women who were in search for work trying to get the little money would accept the offer and go to the trio's home. They expected there to be a child whom they would get introduced to take care of, but baby, were they wrong. When they were in the trio's home, a man would attack them and kill them with a hammer and then cut them up into pieces. After they were done with the murders, one of the women would use the remains of the human flesh and make traditional stuffed meat pastries. Then they would go out on the street corners and sell those meat pastries to people in their community. Motherfuckers was eating their own friends. They didn't feed all of their victims to their neighbors. Sometimes they would eat their victims themselves for lunch or dinner. They claimed human meat was no different than beef. It tasted the same and had the same consistency. So it's like, why should I spend my money on beef if I could just kill somebody and eat them? One of the victims was a 17-year-old mother to an 18-month-old baby. They killed and butchered the mother right in front of the 18-month-old baby. And the next day, they fed the baby pieces of her mother for lunch in a pastry. That way, the baby would never know she was eating her own mother. What they did next to the baby was even worse. Part 2 of the trio that killed their victims and fed them to their neighbors. After the trio had killed a 17-year-old mother in front of her 18-month-old baby, then fed the remains of the mother in pastry form to the 18-month-old baby, they took the baby in and raised it as their own. Thankfully, their whole scheme ended when one of the women tried to use a credit card that belonged to one of the victims who was reporting missing near their home. Like, how dumb can you possibly be? When they searched their home, they dug up their garden and found 2 bodies of a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old woman. When all the news came out about how people in the community had eaten their own neighbors' remains inside these pastries that they had bought from the trio, so many people people were upset. Upset ain't even the word. But the man in the trio's brother claimed that he couldn't have done this to the women because his brother was a vegetarian. But eventually the man and the two women in the trio confessed to their crimes. They said they did what they did because they claimed the women they killed would eventually give birth to thieves and lowlives and claimed they were controlling the population. The man and one woman in the trio were sentenced 71 years in prison and the other woman was sentenced 68 years. And a shocking discovery, the police chief in charge of the investigation discovered that he himself had eaten the murdered women's flesh.
The police accidentally ate the murder weapon and you won't believe how it happened. This story is called Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl and the plot twist is insane. A woman named Mary is waiting for her husband who's a police officer to come home. She's pregnant and happy with her marriage, but when her husband comes home she realizes something is wrong. He says that he has something to tell her and this is where all the drama happens. He says that he's going to leave her and Mary is in shock. She walks to the kitchen and says that she's gonna cook dinner. And there she finds a leg of lamb. Her husband says don't bother because he's gonna go out instead. And Mary, who's enraged, swings the leg of lamb at her husband's head and unalives him. And this is where it gets crazy. So she's thinking, my God, my husband is unalived. I'm pregnant, I cannot go to jail. So she puts the leg of lamb in the oven and cooks it. Then she goes to the grocery store and talks to the grocer about how she was gonna make her husband dinner. Then she comes home and finds her husband's body and pretends like she has no idea what's going on and calls the police. Two officers show up and they begin asking her questions. They start searching for the murder weapon, convinced that it will lead them to whoever's responsible. But hours later, they found nothing. And this is when Mary comes in and asks them if they're hungry. Then she goes back into the kitchen and takes the leg of lamb out of the oven. And the police officers begin eating the leg of lamb that she just used to unalive her husband. The story ends with one of the officers asking about where the murder weapon is, and the other one saying it's probably right under our noses. So yeah, I realize there's a lot more disturbing and shocking books that I need to tell you guys about. So let me know in the comments if you want me to make more of these.
I, 26-year-old female, work a corporate job at a major fast food chain. I won't say the exact title, but I don't work at an office and spend most of my time visiting and coaching stores and associates. Because of this, my family seems to be under the impression that my job is a loser job, despite me making well over $150,000 a year. I think this perception is exasperated by the fact that I'm a frugal person who doesn't tend to surround myself with expensive things. My cousin, 34-year-old male, is a physics professor at a nearby state university and has done very little to hide the fact that he looks down on my job. From what I understand, we make similar money, but he's still paying off his doctorate degree. I didn't go to college. He has a much bigger house and mortgage and 2 kids. I'm child-free, meaning I have much more disposable income than him. For nearly 2 years, he's been talking about how he really wants a Tesla Model X and how he's slowly saving money for it. He'll joke about how much he wants it by describing how he sees it in his dreams in exquisite detail. Well, several months back while we were at my aunt's birthday party, my cousin made yet another backhanded joke about when I get a real job and make real money, and it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was so beyond done. I went back home immediately after the party and ordered a Tesla Model X for myself, exactly to the specifications he has described. So a couple of weeks ago, I picked up my car and brought it home. I didn't tell a single soul in my family I bought it. But yesterday, I had plans to pick up my cousin's older son to babysit, and I knew it was finally time. I rolled up to my cousin's house in my shiny new Tesla that I washed and polished just that morning specifically for this meetup. Needless to say, cousin was pissed. He asked me all about it with strained enthusiasm and got visibly more angry the more he noticed it was just like the one he wanted. So, in what I would assume was retaliation, he tried to make a comment about, wow, it must have been an adventure and a half to find a bank willing to give you a loan like this. I laughed him off and casually told him I wouldn't know since I paid in cash, which is true. He questioned me, so I pulled up a picture on my phone of the title with my name on it. I think that was what broke him because he quickly ended the conversation and went back inside. But now I've been getting messages from his siblings saying how I'm a petty bitch. Even my mom said that she thought he was an ass, but I shouldn't have escalated just because I could. And while I adore my new car, getting back on my cousin wasn't as satisfying as I thought I'd be.